October 1777 brought a bitter chill to the hills surrounding Philadelphia. Autumn leaves crunched beneath Eleanor Wakefield's feet as British soldiers escorted her toward a makeshift gallows. Dawn had barely broken, painting the sky in hues of lavender and gold that seemed cruelly beautiful for what was to be her final sunrise. Eleanor walked with her head high despite her bound hands and the rough rope already chafing her neck. At 22, she had lived a full life, daughter of a scholar, educated beyond convention, and for the past year, a courier for the Continental Army. Captured behind British lines with coded messages sewn into her cloak, she had been quickly condemned as a spy. The small procession reached a clearing where a crude wooden platform stood beneath a sturdy oak branch. Colonel Hargrove stood slightly apart, his expression severe as he consulted his pocket watch. "Right on schedule, Miss Wakefield," he announced. "I admire punctuality, even in the condemned." Eleanor met his gaze steadily. "I wouldn't wish to inconvenience His Majesty's forces." The soldiers guided Eleanor up the wooden steps. From this position, she could see beyond the clearing to the rolling hills beyond, already aflame with autumn colors. Somewhere past those hills, General Washington's forces continued their resistance. She took comfort, knowing her silence would help protect them. Colonel Hargrove unrolled a parchment. "Eleanor Wakefield, you have been found guilty of espionage against the Crown, an act of high treason punishable by death. Have you any final words?" Eleanor drew breath to speak when a commotion erupted at the edge of the clearing. Horses' hooves pounded the earth, and British soldiers scrambled for their weapons. "Stand ready," Hargrove commanded, as 3 riders emerged from the tree line. The lead rider pulled his mount to a dramatic halt. Eleanor recognized him immediately, though they had never met. Captain Matthew Caldwell of the Continental Army, known as the Shadow for his uncanny ability to appear and disappear behind enemy lines. His exploits were legendary: daring raids, strategic brilliance, and unwavering commitment to the Patriot cause. Had he come to rescue her, only to be captured himself? The loss of Caldwell would be a far greater blow to the revolution than her own death. Caldwell dismounted with fluid grace. He was taller than expected, broad-shouldered and commanding, in his Continental uniform. His features were striking: a straight nose, strong jawline partially obscured by a short beard, and eyes the color of a winter sky. "Colonel Hargrove," Caldwell called out, his voice carrying across the clearing. "I see I've arrived at an opportune moment." Hargrove's hand moved to his pistol. "Captain Caldwell, you show remarkable boldness, riding into a British encampment." "Under flag of truce," Caldwell replied, gesturing to the white cloth attached to his companion's rifle. "And with an offer I believe you'll find compelling." "Unless you're here to surrender, I can't imagine what you could offer," Hargrove responded. Though he made no move to arrest the Patriot officer, Caldwell stepped forward, his gaze briefly meeting Eleanor's. "I'm here about Miss Wakefield. The spy has been condemned according to military law," Hargrove stated firmly. "Justice will be carried out." "I'm not contesting your procedures, Colonel," Caldwell said with surprising diplomacy. "I'm proposing an exchange." Hargrove raised an eyebrow. "We have several of your officers in custody. Miss Wakefield hardly merits such a negotiation." "You misunderstand." Caldwell removed his hat, revealing dark hair tied back neatly. "I'm not offering a prisoner exchange. I'm here to claim Miss Wakefield as my bride." A murmur rippled through the assembled soldiers. Eleanor couldn't contain her shock, her carefully maintained composure finally cracking. "Your bride?" Hargrove repeated incredulously. "Indeed." Caldwell's expression remained perfectly serious. "Eleanor Wakefield and I were to be married last spring before the war intervened. I've been searching for her since learning of her capture. It was an outrageous lie." Eleanor had never met Captain Caldwell before this moment, though she had carried messages regarding his operations. A convenient claim, Hargrove said skeptically. One I've never heard mentioned in our intelligence reports. We kept our engagement private for her protection, Caldwell countered smoothly. Given my activities, any known connection would have placed her in danger. If what you say is true, I have proof. Caldwell reached into his coat, withdrawing a small leather pouch. From it he removed a simple gold band, our engagement ring. Her initials are engraved inside. He handed the ring to the nearest British officer, who examined it before passing it to Hargrove. EW is engraved, as he claims, the officer confirmed. Reluctantly, Eleanor watched this performance with growing amazement. The level of detail in Caldwell's deception suggested planning, but how could he have known she would need rescuing? While this is touching, it doesn't change the fact that Miss Wakefield was caught engaged in espionage, Hargrove said. I'm aware of the charges, Caldwell replied, but there are conventions, even in war. I'm appealing to your honor, Colonel. Allow me to marry her before you carry out your sentence. Hargrove frowned. You wish to marry a woman about to be hanged. That seems futile, perhaps, but it would allow her to die with dignity, as Mrs. Caldwell, rather than as a nameless spy. A tense silence fell over the clearing. Eleanor could see the British officers exchanging glances, some moved by the romantic notion, others suspicious. Colonel Hargrove paced, considering. What benefit would the Crown receive from this act of mercy? Information, Caldwell said simply. I'll answer 3 questions truthfully about continental positions or plans. This offer sent another ripple of surprise through the gathering. Would he truly betray military secrets to save her life? Hargrove studied Caldwell. You would compromise your principles for this woman? I would compromise some information, Caldwell corrected. Not my principles. The colonel seemed to wrestle with the decision. Finally he nodded curtly. Very well, Captain. You may have your wedding. Chaplain Morris can perform a brief ceremony. He held up a warning finger. But make no mistake, I will have my information, and while I may postpone Miss Wakefield's execution out of respect for your new union, justice will eventually be served. Relief flooded through Eleanor, tempered by knowing this was likely only a temporary reprieve. Still, hours or days more of life were precious when seconds had been all she expected. The soldiers led her down from the gallows, removing the noose but keeping her hands bound. As she approached Captain Caldwell, she searched his face for some clue to his true intentions. His expression revealed nothing to the British, but as she drew near, he winked, so quickly she might have imagined it. "Hello, my love," he said, his voice carrying to the British officers. "I apologize for the delay in my arrival." "Better late than never, Captain," she replied, summoning a smile. Within the hour, Eleanor found herself standing beside Captain Matthew Caldwell in a hastily arranged ceremony. The chaplain performed an abbreviated service. When prompted, Caldwell placed the gold ring on Eleanor's finger. "With this ring I thee wed," he said, his eyes holding hers with surprising intensity. When pronounced husband and wife, Caldwell leaned down to place a chaste kiss on her lips, brief but convincing for their audience. As dusk approached, Hargrove returned to collect his promised intelligence. Caldwell provided information that Eleanor recognized as either outdated or misleading. The colonel ordered that the newlyweds be given a tent for the night, with guards posted outside. Left alone, Eleanor finally asked, "How did you know I had been captured?" "We have our sources," Caldwell replied quietly. "One of Hargrove's aides sympathizes with our cause. And the ring, the detailed knowledge of my background. The ring belonged to my mother," he answered. "As for your background, your reputation as one of our most effective couriers precedes you." Eleanor still scarcely believed her change in fortune. That morning, she had been prepared to die. Now she sat across from one of the Revolution's legendary figures wearing his mother's ring. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now," Caldwell said, his expression serious, We wait for nightfall and trust our friends to do their part. As darkness enveloped the British encampment, Eleanor found herself balanced between terror and hope, with her life entrusted to a man known throughout the colonies for his daring and his dangerous reputation. Darkness settled over the British encampment like a heavy blanket. Inside their guarded tent, Eleanor and Matthew maintained their charade of newlyweds, while keenly aware of every sound beyond the canvas walls. Eleanor had changed from her execution clothes into a simple dress provided by the British, a small courtesy that struck her as oddly civilized under the circumstances. "Your colonel has unexpected moments of decency," she observed quietly. "Hargrove is a soldier, not a monster," Matthew replied, keeping his voice low. "In another time, we might even have been friends." Eleanor studied the man across from her, still trying to reconcile his fearsome reputation with the thoughtful individual she was coming to know. "You've risked everything to save a stranger," she said. "Why?" Matthew glanced toward the tent entrance before answering. "You're hardly a stranger, Miss Wakefield. Your work has been instrumental to our cause. Still, there are other couriers, surely not worth exposing yourself to capture." "Every person fighting for liberty is worth saving," he replied, then smiled slightly. "Besides, General Washington was quite insistent when he learned of your capture. He values your service highly." Eleanor felt a surge of pride, though it was tempered by their situation. "And now you're trapped here as well." "Not trapped," Matthew corrected. "Precisely where I planned to be." A guard passed by their tent, momentarily silencing them. When the footsteps receded, Matthew leaned closer. "In approximately 1 hour, there will be a diversion on the eastern perimeter of the camp. When it happens, be ready to move immediately." "Stay close to me. Do exactly as I say." Eleanor nodded. "And if we're caught trying to escape," Matthew's expression turned grave, "then we'll both face the gallows. But I don't intend to be caught." The hour passed with agonizing slowness. They maintained their performance, speaking of fabricated memories for any eavesdropping guards. Matthew described a fictional first, meeting in Boston, while Eleanor elaborated with details of subsequent courtship walks. As the time approached, Matthew extinguished their lamp. "We should retire for the night," he said loudly, then whispered, "Remove your shoes. We'll move more quietly in stocking feet." Eleanor complied, her heart racing. Matthew moved silently around the tent, checking its structure with practiced precision. He returned with something glinting in his hand, a small knife he must have kept concealed. A sudden commotion erupted from somewhere in the camp, shouts followed by what sounded like small explosions. The guards outside called to each other. In confusion. "That's our cue," Matthew whispered, moving to the rear of the tent. With quick movements, he sliced through the canvas, creating an opening just large enough to slip through. "Ladies first." Eleanor didn't hesitate. She ducked through the opening, immediately pressing herself against the outer canvas. Matthew followed seconds later, carefully positioning the cut flap to conceal their escape route. The diversion continued. On the far side of the camp, something was burning, sending sparks into the night sky. Most soldiers had rushed toward the commotion, leaving their section less guarded than usual. Matthew took Eleanor's hand, guiding her into the shadows between tents. They moved silently, freezing whenever a soldier passed nearby. Eleanor was grateful for her years navigating hostile territory as a courier. She knew how to move quietly, how to control her breathing, how to become nearly invisible. They reached the edge of the encampment where the woods began. The guard post was unmanned, its occupants drawn to the chaos. Matthew pointed to a particular path through the underbrush. "Follow." "That exactly," he breathed against her ear. "Step only where I step." She understood immediately. The path must have been cleared of leaves and twigs that might create noise. Someone had prepared this escape route meticulously. They slipped into the forest, darkness enveloping them completely. Matthew led with confidence, navigating by some internal compass. After 20 minutes, they reached a clearing where 2 horses waited, tethered to a branch. "Your men," Eleanor whispered. "Our allies," Matthew corrected, helping her mount. "The local farmers are more sympathetic to our cause than the British realize." They rode through the night, avoiding main roads and keeping to forest paths. Matthew set a demanding pace, clearly familiar with the terrain. Eleanor matched him stride for stride, grateful for her childhood spent riding on her father's estate. The autumn air bit through her thin dress, but the exhilaration of escape kept the cold at bay. After several hours, they approached a small farmhouse set back from any road. A single lantern glowed in the window. Matthew led them to the barn, rather than the house, dismounting and helping Eleanor down. "We'll rest here until dawn," he explained. "The family has a British officer billeted in their home, so we can't risk being seen, but they've prepared the hayloft for us." The loft contained 2 bedrolls, a covered lantern, water, and food wrapped in cloth. Eleanor climbed the ladder gratefully, her legs trembling from the long ride and aftermath of fear. "You should eat," he advised, unwrapping bread and cheese. "We have another long day tomorrow." Eleanor accepted the food. "I still can't believe we escaped so easily." "I wouldn't call it easy," Matthew replied, his exhaustion showing as he sat on one of the bedrolls. "Hargrove isn't a man who accepts defeat graciously. By now he'll have search parties combing every road and farm within 20 miles. Hence hiding in a house with a British officer," Eleanor said with admiration. "They won't search where their own are quartered." Matthew removed his boots and coat. Eleanor noticed a dark stain on his sleeve. "You're wounded," she said, moving closer. Matthew shrugged. "A scratch from our escape. One guard was more alert than his companions." Eleanor frowned, gently pushing up his sleeve to reveal a shallow but lengthy cut. She located a small medical kit among their supplies. "You have medical training?" Matthew asked as she efficiently cleaned the wound. "My father believed in practical education for both his sons and his daughter," Eleanor replied, applying a salve before wrapping the cut. "Much to my mother's dismay. Your father sounds like a forward-thinking man." "He was. He died last winter. Pneumonia." "I'm sorry." He believed. "In liberty," she continued, securing the bandage. "When I decided to serve as a courier, it was with his blessing. My brothers are both with Washington's army. My mother manages our estate alone now." "My parents are both gone," Matthew said. "Father at Lexington, mother from heartbreak shortly after." "Yet you gave me her ring," Eleanor observed, twisting the gold band. "It seemed the most convincing prop for our performance," he replied, though something in his tone suggested there was more to the decision. Eleanor began to remove the ring, but Matthew stopped her with a gentle hand. "Keep it for now. We're not yet beyond British lines. We may need to resume our roles before reaching safety." "Tell me about yourself," she said, settling onto her bedroll. "The real Matthew Caldwell, not the fearsome shadow." Matthew smiled. Faintly. "I was a professor of mathematics at Harvard before the war, hardly the background one expects for a military man." "That explains your tactical reputation," Eleanor observed. "You approach warfare as an equation to be solved." "I suppose I do," he acknowledged. "Each variable must be accounted for, each outcome calculated. It's not unlike plotting celestial movements, except the stakes are somewhat higher." "Indeed," his expression sobered. "Lives hang in the balance of every decision, including yours." Eleanor met his gaze. "I knew the risks when I began carrying messages, as did you when you entered that British camp. Most people would still be overcome with nearly being executed. Yet here you are, analyzing our situation with remarkable clarity. Would hysterics improve our chances of survival?" Eleanor asked dryly. A genuine smile broke across Matthew's face, transforming his features. "I can see why Washington values you so highly." "Eleanor," she corrected, "if I'm to wear your mother's ring and bear, Your name, even temporarily, you might as well use my given name. Eleanor, he repeated, you should rest. Dawn comes early, and with it the next stage of our journey. They extinguished the lantern. Eleanor lay awake, listening to Matthew's breathing gradually slow. She marveled at the extraordinary turn of events, from condemned spy to counterfeit wife in the space of a day. The gold band felt warm against her skin, a tangible reminder of the strange bond forged between them through danger and deception. Whatever lay ahead, Eleanor knew with certainty that her life had irrevocably changed course, diverted from an abrupt end at the gallows to an uncertain future alongside one of the revolution's most enigmatic figures. As sleep claimed her, Eleanor's last thought was of Matthew's smile, not the calculated expression he had shown the British, but the genuine moment they had shared in the quiet of the hayloft. If you enjoyed this tale of courage and cunning during America's fight for independence, subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories of heroism throughout history. New chapters released weekly. Don't miss the conclusion of Eleanor and Matthew's journey in Chapter 3. 3 days of careful travel brought Eleanor and Matthew to the outskirts of the Continental Army's winter encampment near Valley Forge. They had journeyed primarily at night, following obscure trails and twice changing horses at safe houses. Throughout their journey, they maintained the pretense of husband and wife whenever they encountered others, a performance that grew more natural with each repetition. Eleanor found herself studying Matthew during quiet moments, the methodical way he planned each stage of their journey, his unfailing courtesy despite difficult circumstances, and most intriguingly, his habit of quoting poetry when he thought she was asleep. Behind the fearsome reputation of the Shadow existed a cultured, thoughtful man whose complexity increasingly fascinated her. As they approached the Patriot encampment, Matthew guided their horses to a small rise overlooking the sprawling collection of tents and crude cabins being constructed for winter. "We'll be welcomed as heroes," Eleanor observed. "Your rescue mission was extraordinary." Matthew's expression remained reserved. "I merely did my duty, as did you, carrying those dispatches." "Still wearing your mother's ring," she reminded him, holding up her left hand where the gold band caught the pale November sunlight. "Shall I return it now that our charade is ending?" Something flickered in Matthew's eyes. "Keep it until we've reported to General Washington. For consistency's sake." They rode into camp, attracting immediate attention. Word of their arrival spread quickly, and by the time they reached the central area, a small crowd had gathered. Colonel Alexander Hamilton himself came to greet them, his youthful features brightening at the sight of Eleanor. "Miss Wakefield, we had nearly given up hope." His gaze shifted to Matthew with clear admiration. "Captain Caldwell, the general will be most eager to hear of your success." They were escorted to Washington's headquarters, a modest stone farmhouse requisitioned for the winter. Inside, the tall, imposing figure of General Washington rose from behind a desk covered with maps and dispatches. "Captain Caldwell." "Miss Wakefield." Washington's deep voice carried genuine warmth. "Your safe return is most gratifying. We feared the worst when we learned of your capture." Eleanor curtsied respectfully. "Thank you, Your Excellency. Without Captain Caldwell's intervention, your fears would have been justified." Washington gestured for them to be seated, dismissing the other officers. "I would hear the full account, if you please." Matthew provided a detailed report, explaining his strategy of claiming Eleanor as his betrothed and their subsequent escape. He omitted only the most personal aspects of their journey, their conversations in the hayloft, the quiet moments of connection. Washington listened intently. When Matthew finished, the general turned to Eleanor. "And the dispatches you were carrying? I presume they were confiscated." "They were, Your Excellency," Eleanor confirmed. "However, I had committed the crucial information to memory, as per protocol." She proceeded to recite details about British supply routes and troop movements. Washington's eyes widened slightly. the closest he typically came to showing surprise. "Impressive, Miss Wakefield. Your dedication serves our cause admirably. And what of your unique method of rescue?" Washington continued, his gaze moving between them. "Captain Caldwell's report indicates you were married by a British chaplain. As part of the deception," Eleanor felt heat rise in her cheeks. "It was a performance, sir, a necessary ruse. Yet legally binding, I would think," Washington noted, the barest hint of amusement touching his features. "A marriage performed by an ordained chaplain, with witnesses." Matthew shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, I assure you—" Washington raised a hand. "Your personal arrangements are not my concern, Captain, except where they might affect military matters. I merely observe that Miss Wakefield now has a legitimate claim to the name Mrs. Caldwell, should she choose to exercise it." Eleanor sat in stunned silence, having never considered this aspect of their charade. Of course, the marriage ceremony had been real in a legal sense, even if performed under false pretenses. "That will be a matter for Captain Caldwell and myself to discuss privately," she finally managed, her voice steadier than she felt. Washington nodded. "A sensible approach. For now, you both need rest. Miss Wakefield, quarters have been arranged with Mrs. Ross, who has offered to share her cabin. Captain Caldwell, report tomorrow at noon for your next assignment." They emerged from headquarters into the fading afternoon light. Eleanor felt oddly unmoored, caught between relief at their safe return and uncertainty about her new status. "Well," Matthew said as they walked through the camp, "that was not quite the debriefing I expected." "No," Eleanor agreed, twisting his mother's ring around her finger. "I hadn't considered the legal implications of our performance." They reached a small cabin where the seamstress Elizabeth Ross had established her quarters. Before they parted, Matthew took Eleanor's hand. "We should discuss this," he said quietly. "Not now, but soon. There are complications to consider." "Tomorrow evening," he suggested, "after my meeting with Washington?" "Tomorrow evening," she agreed. That night, settled in Mrs. Ross's space, Eleanor found sleep elusive. The events of the past days swirled in her mind. The gallows at dawn, the unexpected rescue, the journey that had brought her not just to safety, but to an entirely unexpected personal situation. She was, in the eyes of the law, married to a man she had known for less than a week. As evening approached the next day, Eleanor made her way to the small garden behind Washington's headquarters. Matthew was already waiting, looking more rested than she had yet seen him, dressed in a fresh uniform. "Eleanor," he greeted her. "You look well." "Amazing what clean clothes and sleep can accomplish," she replied with a small smile, "though I admit I didn't sleep much." "Nor I," he confessed, gesturing to a stone bench. "I've been considering our situation." Eleanor nodded, preparing herself for the suggestion of annulment she expected. Matthew seemed uncharacteristically hesitant. "Before we discuss the obvious solution, there's something you should know. My rescue mission wasn't entirely official." Eleanor frowned. "What do you mean?" "My original departure from camp was without specific orders. I learned of your capture through my own intelligence network and acted on my initiative." "You risked court-martial," Eleanor realized. "Why would you take such a chance for someone you'd never met?" Matthew's gaze held hers steadily. "That's not entirely accurate. We hadn't formally met, but I've been aware of you for some time. Your courier routes occasionally intersected with my operations. I'd observed you from a distance, read your reports. You would be watching me, admiring your work," he clarified. "When I learned you'd been captured and condemned, I couldn't stand by and let such a valuable asset be lost." "A valuable asset," Eleanor repeated, trying to ignore the faint disappointment his explanation evoked. "More than that," he finally admitted. "I admired not just your work, but your spirit. When I heard of your capture, the thought of you facing execution alone was unbearable. Eleanor studied his face, seeing vulnerability beneath his composed exterior. "The logical solution now is annulment," Matthew said. "We entered the arrangement under duress without true consent, and the marriage remains unconsummated." "Yes," Eleanor agreed, ignoring the curious hollow feeling his assessment created. "That would be sensible." Matthew was silent for a long moment. "But I find myself reluctant to pursue it immediately," he finally said. Eleanor's heart quickened unexpectedly. "Oh, these past days with you have been revealing," he continued. "I've come to respect not just your capabilities, but your character, your intelligence, your resilience." He turned to face her directly. "I find myself wondering what might develop between us if we allowed ourselves time to truly know one another." Eleanor felt warmth spreading through her chest. "Are you suggesting we remain married after knowing each other less than a week?" "I'm suggesting we neither rush to dissolve nor fully embrace our unexpected union," Matthew clarified. "Rather, that we allow ourselves the opportunity to discover if what began as deception might develop into something genuine." The proposition was unconventional by society's standards, yet Eleanor found herself intrigued rather than offended. "A courtship after marriage," she mused. "Certainly an unorthodox approach." Matthew's lips curved in the smile that transformed his stern features. "I've never been accused of conventional thinking, and if we discover we're ill-suited, the annulment remains an option." "Of course," he assured her. "I ask only for time, to know you beyond the crisis that brought us together." "Very well, Captain Caldwell," she said, making her decision. "I accept your proposal to postpone any decision until we've had proper opportunity to determine if it might become something true." Relief and pleasure mingled in Matthew's expression. "Thank you, Eleanor. Though I wonder," she added with a touch of mischief, "what the fearsome shadow will think of his reputation once word spreads that he has taken a wife." Matthew laughed, a warm, rich sound she had not heard before. "Perhaps they'll say I've finally met my match in courage and cunning." In the months that followed, their unusual arrangement evolved in ways neither could have predicted. Matthew's duties frequently took him away from camp, but he returned with a regularity his commanders found surprising in a man previously known for extended missions. They spent their evenings together when circumstances allowed, discussing everything, from philosophy to poetry to their hopes for America's future. Gradually, the artifice of their relationship gave way to something genuine, respect that blossomed into affection and eventually into love. By spring, when Washington's army prepared to leave Valley Forge, Eleanor and Matthew faced a decision. Their temporary marriage had extended through the winter. On the eve of the army's departure, Matthew brought Eleanor to the same garden where they had begun their unusual courtship. "I've been carrying this since that day at the British camp," he said, producing a small box. Opening it, he revealed a second ring, this one newer, set with a small pearl. "I purchased it in Philadelphia before coming to rescue you. A presumptuous action, perhaps, but something in me knew even then that our meeting was fated." "You brought a second ring to a rescue mission?" Eleanor asked in amazement. "Hope often defies logic," Matthew admitted with a smile. "Now I ask you, with clear minds and open hearts, far from the shadow of the gallows, will you remain my wife?" "Not from necessity, but from choice, I will," she said simply. "A story to tell our grandchildren," Matthew suggested, slipping the pearl ring onto her finger alongside his mother's gold band. As spring sunshine broke through the clouds, Eleanor and Matthew sealed their renewed vows with a kiss. No longer a performance, but a true promise between equals who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances. Their journey had begun with a gallows at dawn and a desperate deception. It would continue through the revolution's darkest days and beyond, a partnership forged in crisis, but sustained by something far more enduring, the quiet revolution of two hearts finding in each other not just salvation, but home. Thank you for joining Eleanor and Matthew on their journey from a desperate rescue to a genuine love story. If you enjoyed this tale of courage and connection during America's fight for independence, subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories of heroism throughout history.